right, we are recording. Whoops. Better roll up the window. It's quite hot in here. Hey, it's Dave. I wanted to join you for a video today, give you my thoughts on some things. I wanted to come in today and talk about Psalm 4, but there's a couple quick little random things I want to hit first before I get into Psalm 4. Sorry about the beard. I'm kind of transitioning from hobo directly into full Sasquatch, so we'll see what happens in another few weeks, right? Yeah, these are interesting times. This is like the year that will not end, right? So fascinating. I wanted to talk really quickly for a moment about church, about going to church, because if you're like me, then the place you've been attending has been shut down. Although I went through that a year ahead of time, the church that I had been attending for 30 years was shut down by the denomination, of all things, and they moved someone else in to take over the place, which was hard because, you put down roots for 30 years, they run deep, you see the same people every week, and suddenly that ends, and the whole setting changes, which kind of leads me into what I want to say about church to begin with, because I've been, sorry, it's super hot in here. I've been contemplating the connection between church and theater. Now, hear me out on this. I've been going to church for the past, I don't know how many decades, and it dawned on me recently, and by recently I mean the last couple weeks, that really it's like going to the theater every week. It's like everybody there has their own role that they're acting out, and the preacher gets up and does his hour-long monologue, and everyone's there you're like moving, the audience is moved emotionally, which is what you do when you go to good theater, really. I've been trying to analyze it neutrally. I'm not casting dispersions on it, although I suppose I could. The whole idea of going to the same church for 30 years, after a while I noticed that it seemed like every Sunday was basically the same. It was like the same performance. It's like going to the same performance every week. You hear a slightly different monologue, but everything else is basically the same. The songs are the same. You may get a new one every now and then. The announcements and the way the things proceed and people being prayed for, and maybe if there's a prophetic word, if your church is into that and all that. After a while, it's like you interact with the people and then you go home for a week and again come back the next week and do it all over again. I've noticed that since this pandemic happened in the quarantine, and I've been having to not do that now for the first time in, like I said, several decades of going every week, that I think I'm closer to the Lord now in many, many different ways than I ever was during my 30 years of going to church. And I think that might have something to do with the fact that the weight that we put on to church service. It's like you hold out to go to church on Sunday so you can get what you need in order to get through the next week so that you can then go to church again. It becomes a weekly thing. At least it did for me. Church began to symbolize something, as though you're going to be fed once a week, and hopefully that will nourish you throughout the whole week. And you wrestle, you have your ups and downs through the week, and you do your highs and lows, but then if I can only get to church so I can see these people, and that your friends, right? Friends at church, people who will help you wrestle with things and conquer them and get the strength and the victory you need in order to face another week. The routine of it, it never dawned on me what that was doing in me until I had that whole routine brought to a halt, and now I'm kind of on my own. And in a real sense, the days of the week start to blend into one another, and it almost becomes like every day is Sunday in a way to me, in a way that was never that way before. So I don't know, I think there are things going on here that there are some extremely good things going on with the challenges. I look at everyone clamoring to get their routine back. John MacArthur and the trouble he's having opening his church again and battling with the state, and people wearing masks and not wearing masks, and the uproar about all that. As though getting back into the building and being surrounded by people that are struggling like you somehow gives something that you need in order to grow and to survive. I haven't had that for months. Well, since the beginning of the year when the quarantine began. And like I said, I'm closer to the Lord now than I ever have been, and it's a moment-by-moment thing in a way that it never was before. So I don't know. I can't really fault it. I'm not saying that I'm not going to go back to church once they open up again. I may or I may not. I don't know. If my connection with the Lord can be as present then as it is now, then there may be times when I don't need to. Whereas before, I just would have gone because, of course, you go to church. It's Sunday, right? So you don't even think about it. But now it's like, what are you doing now, Lord? What are you doing right now? Not like this Sunday, what will you be doing? It's like, what are you doing, Lord, right now? You know, I mean, that's the way we're supposed to be living, I think. And I think that maybe the church, in a way, has been counterproductive to that. It has for me. I can't imagine I'm alone in this, but maybe I am. Maybe there's something that people need at church, in the actual building, and singing with people around you, and then sitting there all together and watching the pastor deliver his monologue. I don't mean to sound that way. I know there's a strong connection between the church persona that we put on when we're at church and the person that we are at home. I mean, come on, let's be honest. You're not the same person at church that you are at home or at work, or it's like you put on a variation of yourself. It's like putting on a costume wherever you go anyways. You just have your church face and your church clothes, and you go and you do the church thing. You smile and you hug and you say God bless you, and oh yes, everything's fine when it's not, or it might not be, or it might be fine. I don't know, but you can't. There are certain restrictions that the role, the character of church attendee kind of places upon us that we seem to be okay with. Part of these last few weeks has been watching church sermons and different church services online on YouTube and seeing just what everyone's doing. And some of the more modern churches, it's just straight up theater, man. They've got the black stage and the colored lights and the smoke machines and the rock show for worship, and some of them go even beyond that. And it's just crazy. It's like going to theater. And in the theater, the same way, you're trying to move the audience and communicate a message at the same time so that they can leave and go, wow, that was such a moving experience, which is exactly what we try to do at church too. As the preacher, I've been a teacher, and I've done announcements, and I've done a lot of the roles where you get up in front of people and you speak in a classroom setting and to the church as a whole. And I was also in charge of the drama ministry at the church I attended for 30 years. So I had that aspect as well. Church really was a theater for me in a lot of ways. I just never realized how thorough that connection was. So maybe this is to kill the theater aspect of church, so that when we start going to church again, maybe it'll be different, or maybe it'll be the same, and those who are close to the Lord now just won't go back. Maybe all that will be left are the pretenders. The same Greek word for hypocrite is the same word for actor. They're both the same thing. You're putting on a role. You're pretending. You're pretending that you're something that you're not. You're portraying something. So maybe Jesus had a lot of trouble with the Pharisees, who also did the outward religious thing with the garments and the genuflecting and the gathering of the admiration of people. It's like you're like rock stars in a sense, or theater stars, actors, famous actors. So yeah, Jesus had a lot of harsh things to say about hypocrisy. I was always threatening to do a video on hypocrisy, and I think I may at some point. Who knows? But maybe God's doing something with all of this quarantine stuff to get at that in a way. Or maybe to cull out those who don't want to put up with the nonsense anymore. But then what do? You can't be a simpleton or a singleton, right? Maybe. I don't know. The prophets from Old Testament seem to each be individuals. So yeah, how much time did that take? 9 minutes. Wow, it's quite an introduction. But I think there's a lot there. I watch preachers, and you can tell when they're preaching because they put on that preacher voice. It's like they're acting a role. Everyone, open your Bibles. David Wilkerson was big on that. He's got that preacher voice, and he gets into it, and you hear it on the radio preachers too. They get that. Oh, if we only would love the Lord and people, the church would and it's like you get that. It's hard for me to see past that anymore. It's like it clutters the message. And once I see past it and listen to what the words that the preachers are actually saying, a lot of times there's nothing there. It's all delivery. It's all substance. And what you look at what they're really saying, and you're like, wait, what? It's depressing in a way, but maybe that dynamic has been left in place for too many decades, and it's done something to the church in a way that needs to be undone. And who's going to be able to undo it but the Lord? It's His church. Upon this rock I'll build my church. We're supposed to be His. We're supposed to be His servants. all that to say, I want to talk about Psalm 4 today. There's somebody coming this way. Hold on. He's going to go trundling on by, I believe. I don't have my glasses on. I can't tell if he's making eye contact or not. Here he goes. Lord bless him. I wanted to talk about the entire Psalm 8. It's only 8 verses long, but as I was preparing notes for this, I realized just verse 1 alone could take half an hour. So I'm just going to hit a few thoughts from verse 1, and then we'll see where it goes from there. The rest of the verse is fantastic. I've been listening to the Psalms lately. Psalm 4, Psalm 68, Psalm 78 have been especially impactful on me of late. So I wanted to start with Psalm 4. Now listen to this. Hear me when I call, O God of my righteousness. Thou hast enlarged me when I was in distress. Have mercy upon me and hear my prayer. All right. There's so many things going on in this verse. It's remarkable. The first one I wanted to mention was hear, which is the first verse, or the first word. It's also used toward the very end of the same verse. Hear me when I call, O God of my righteousness. Ana kara Elohim tzedek. Hear me when I call, O God of my righteousness. That word hear me is repeated later when he says, and hear my prayer. That's how he ends the verse. But the word for hear is two different words in the Hebrew. It's not the same word used twice. It's translated twice, hear and hear, but they're two different words. The first one, as I said, is called anah. And almost every time that this word is used in the Old Testament, it's used answer. A couple times, 42 times it's translated hear. But 242 times it's translated answer, or respond to me, or speak to me when I call. Testify, as a witness is testifying, ana. That's how it's used, to respond as a witness. It also means to sing, and it also means to dwell there. So it's interesting that this verse, hear me, let me see. Hear me when I call, O God of my righteousness. Hear me. Again, most of the time it's not hear me, it's answer me. So there's an answering aspect to this understanding of hear. It's like hear me and think about it and respond and answer respond directly to me when I pray to you, Lord. Hear. It isn't just listen and understand, but a response is requested. Please hear me and do, let it affect your actions, Lord, in response to me. Which is remarkable because the other word for hear is, it's called Shema. If you've heard that word Shema, you're familiar with the Shema is what they call it. The Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Hear. That's the one that's used most often translated for hear. It's 1,200 times almost, 1,159 times it's translated here. To hear, to listen, to obey is built into that word as well. To hear, to listen, and to obey, to understand. It's the same word that's used to hear as a judge would hear a case. So interesting. The first one, to hear me when I call, to hear, process it, understand, and respond, speak in response. It's not just hear what I'm saying, but do something in return. And it's the hear that's used to describe a witness in a courtroom who's hearing what's being asked and responding based on personal experience. This is the input that he's giving to the case. The other hear is used as the judge would hear the witnesses and the other evidence in order to weigh the elements that are going on in the courtroom, of the elements of the case, in order to make a judgment. So both of those words for hear are used here in this same verse. It's fascinating. Hear me when I call, O God. Please respond. Please hear me, God, when I call to you, and respond to me in a way that's tangible. So you're not just hearing it and contemplating it, and it's not getting out of the realm of thought. It's actually translating into some sort of response that I can then hear and obey that other hear. Did you see how the other hear had to do with to listen to and to obey? Obedience is factored into this definition here. So when it says, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Implicit in that, built into that understanding of Hear, O Israel, Shema, Israel, is hear and obey. Don't just listen to it, but listen to it, understand it, and obey it. Let it translate into behavior. Obedience is when what you believe about God translates into a behavior that can be noted. Back to verse 1. Hear me when I call, O God of my righteousness. When I call. That is a fascinating word. So hear me when I call. The word call, kara, it's used 735 times. And listen to how this is translated. Kara, call, to call out. To call out, to recite, to cry something out. Not just to speak, but to call it out loudly with volume, to make it heard, to proclaim it. To call is to proclaim it. To utter a loud sound. It has to do with volume. Hear me when I call, is what he says. Hear me when I call, O God of my righteousness. When I shout out loud to get your attention. To call out with nothing else hindering you. How much detail to give? I had an occasion where an old acquaintance of mine from high school, after a certain amount of time, came to my house and basically had a breakdown, and it freaked everybody in the house out. What I did, which I had no intention of doing, was I stood up on my feet right there in the room with this person who's having their breakdown, and I just prayed out loud. I called out loud to God and just it was like I blocked everything out and everybody out, and I just immediately had a connection with God, and I talked to him and said, Lord, I don't know what's going on in this situation right here, but you do. You made this whole world. You made all of the people and everything in it. You created me. You created everyone in this room. You understand the dynamics of what's happening right now. And I pray that you would come in and bring peace. And I just pray. I don't know how long I prayed, maybe a minute, maybe longer. I completely tuned out everything, and all I did was connect and call out to him. I didn't stop and address my old acquaintance. I didn't address the situation and try to bring whatever I could, because I knew immediately it was out of my league. And there was only one person who was going to bring peace to this situation. And so I called out to the Lord. And by the time I finished praying, I stopped and looked back. The person who was having a breakdown was sitting there looking at me with this not odd, O-D-D, but A-W-E-D look. Tears, a couple fistful of his own hair. And he was just like, and it just completely neutralized the entire situation by calling out to God. Hear me, O God. Hear me when I call, O God of my righteousness. It was instinctive. I didn't put any thought into it. I never thought about, well, what would I do in this situation? It just happened. Immediately, I knew the situation was over my head. I shot to my feet right there, blocked everybody out, and called out on the Lord. And he answered. And it fixed the situation. It brought peace to the situation. And the evening resolved itself. I won't go into that. But that's what comes to mind when I see this, when it says call on God. Call out. There's something about calling out. There's something about speaking in general, to just put your thoughts into words. That decision that we make, like I'm doing right now, to take your thoughts and to give them action and to let them come out. It's like naming. This word call also means to name, and it's the same exact word that God uses, the same word, kara, that God uses in the very beginning of Genesis. He called the light day, and he called the darkness night. He called the firmament heaven, and he called the dry land earth. He called their name Adam. It's labeling something. It's putting boundaries on. It's identifying something. It's a form of judgment. You're taking the situation in, and you're calling out its name, and you're putting constraints on it. You're putting boundaries on it. It's a judgment. You're a judge. You're taking in information, and you're speaking. This is my resolution to this. It's the same word that when Adam named all the animals, all the beasts of the field, and all the fowls of the air, and everything that crawled on the ground, all the cattle. Adam took in the situation, evaluated it, and gave them names. He called out. He named them. It's the same exact word. He attributed something to them that then defined who they were. I think when he gives us names, when he gives us our new names, and Jesus has several names, I think names are important in a way that we don't understand, that I don't fully understand yet, but I know it has something to do with judgment. Because you're evaluating, you're assessing, you're coming to a conclusion, you're speaking something out. That's like a judge giving the verdict. And it's putting something into motion that goes into the records. Bam. This is your new name. This is your name. I'm calling the day. I'm calling the light day, God said. I'm calling the evening. I'm calling the darkness night. He gave them names. He established what they were. He put boundaries, like the ocean. Lord, you're the one who told the ocean to go this far and no farther. It's like you put limitations on something that was before kind of nebulous and ununderstandable, not understandable. It's like you bring something into coalition. You coalesce something to bring it into where you can name it and identify it, and bam, this is what it is. It's a judgment. And I think everything that we speak is a form of that, because we're assessing, we're thinking, and we're saying something. I think that's why it says every idle word that a man shall speak, he'll have to give an account for it in the day of judgment, because it has to do with judgment. I think every song that we sing, I think every prayer that we pray is a form of judgment. When you decide what to pray about, when was the last time you stopped and thought about the dynamics of when you start to pray? What was it that preceded that first word of your prayer? Something you're chewing on in your heart, and you decide, I need to pray about this. That is, the decision has been made. Prayer needs to happen. And so you decide to unpack whatever this nebulous swarm of thoughts and ideas and emotions that are going on and coalesce them into words, and you offer them, you set them before the Lord for His consideration. Hear me and respond. Hear me when I call, O God of my righteousness. Hear and respond. There's a dynamic that goes on back and forth between the Lord and us. And I think that all of that is accounted for, and we'll have to stand and evaluate it at some day at the judgment seat. I think He's training us to be judges, and I think that goes far deeper into our DNA than we realize. Everything that we say, there's a motivation behind it that becomes then visible based on what you're saying. If you lie, that's why lying and hypocrisy is a problem with the Lord. Again, hypocrite acting, when you're pretending to be something that you're not, when something's going on here and you decide instead to craft words that portray something else for your own gain, I think that's a big problem with the Lord. And I think that He's looking for judges who don't play those games. And I think that just life itself is a sifting, it's a filtration process for the Lord, for Him to identify the people that He's trying to locate as judge. He will call them judge. Speak out their name, judge. This will define you now. I know that you're qualified, and I can see in your heart, and I know the things that are going on. Thoughts are a different issue altogether. I was thinking about that. I was thinking about thoughts. I don't know that we're going to be held accountable for thoughts the same way that we will with the words that we actually speak, because those are actions that can be recorded and written down and noted and asked about. But things that fleeting thoughts, I don't know. They come from everywhere, and you capture this as take every thought captive. I think Paul says in one place. You grab them and you dismiss them. It's like, I think that if you dismiss thoughts that you know are going to be fruitless, then you won't be accountable for the fruitless thought that you were having that popped into your head like a bee or something. You chase it out. I think if we choose to dwell on something, that's something that can be noted and we could be judged for. But as far as the winds blowing where they will and the thoughts that come popping into our head and we chase them out, I think that that's part of judgment, a part of our training. But I don't know that if you have some crude or lustful thought that pops into your head because you see something or someone says something and it triggers something, and then you immediately grab it by the throat and show it the door. I think that I don't know that we'll be held accountable for the thought itself, but for how we handle them. So yeah, thoughts and prayers and songs and words and communication in general has been fascinating to me. This whole dynamic of trying to communicate one thought to another human being and what happens on the way back and when it goes there and then back again. You know, I don't know. There's the whole idea of that is just endlessly fascinating to me. I am 25 minutes in, so I'm going to call this, I'm going to bring this to a close here. But as you can see, there's so much with this verse alone that I would need forever just to go through. This can't be an episode of Questionanity, because we're not going to go through the whole verse, the whole psalm, the whole chapter. Hear me when I call, O God of my righteousness. Righteousness has to do with judgment also. When I first started this channel, it seemed like every topic that I was hitting had something to do with obedience. It's like obedience was the common theme. Sorry about I'm sweating like a pig in here. it's segueing into righteousness and judgment. It seems to me now that everything I've been looking into, I can see the connection with judging, with learning to judge properly, and with righteousness, righteous judgment. Judge righteous judgment, Jesus says. Don't judge by the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. We've talked about that before. God of my righteousness. That's the name that David is giving to God. God has many names, but this is the one he's calling him in this particular verse. Elohim Tzedek. Tzedek? I'm probably not pronouncing that right, but that means righteousness, and it's used a ton in the Old Testament as well. Righteous judging it's connected to judging, to judges, and to rulership, and to kings. Thou hast enlarged me when I was in distress. Have mercy on me and hear my prayer. Before I get into enlarged and distress and mercy and prayer, even deeper than I have, I'm going to call this one quits because this is an awful lot to make you endure. So, thoughts on that, on going to church, how church is a theater, if you want to talk about that. I don't think in a negative way. I think it hits the same things in a human being that going to the theater does. I think it does. And I think that's why, for the most part, going to church is kind of ineffective anymore. We need something stronger than that. We need something that's more moment by moment. So if you want to talk about that in the comments, that's great. You want to talk about the idea of hearing, the two different types of hearing that we talked about, and how responding is built into that first type of hearing, as a witness hears and responds, as opposed to the way a judge hears and then responds. And then we can talk about naming and about the importance of names and calling out to him as a form of solidifying what's going on, in the same way that Adam was naming the animals and that God was naming the elements of the 7 days of creation. And there's more to it than that. I just scratched the surface. Look into that word for call. It's really remarkable study. All right, I'm going to stop for now, and we'll see you on the next one, and we'll see where it goes from there. All right, thanks, bye.